In the heart of a glittering metropolis where skyscrapers pierce the night sky like indifferent sentinels, a ragged figure darted through the shadows of an alleyway. He was no more than 12, his skin dark as the forgotten corners of the city, his clothes threadbare remnants of a life long eroded by hardship. Malik's eyes, sharp and haunted, fixed on the opulent restaurant across the street, where crystal chandeliers cast golden halos over the elite. Inside, a billionaire named Elias Harrington, clad in a tailored suit that cost more than most people's homes, raised a glass of deep crimson wine to his lips, toasting a deal that would cement his empire. The storm outside raged, rain lashing. The windows like accusations, but Malik's heart pounded louder. He had smelled it, the faint acrid tang wafting from a discarded vial near the back entrance, the same scent that had haunted his nightmares. It was the poison, the silent killer that had ravaged his world. Without a second thought, he bolted across the slick pavement, bursting through the heavy doors into the hushed elegance of the dining room. Patrons gasped as this intruder, dripping and wild-eyed, lunged toward Harrington's table. His small hand shot out, knocking the glass from the billionaire's grasp just as it touched his mouth. The wine spilled like blood across the white tablecloth, and Harrington froze, his face a mask of astonishment. What Harrington didn't know in that frozen moment was that this boy's desperate act wasn't random heroism. It was the eruption of a buried truth, one steeped in the toxic undercurrents of racial injustice that had poisoned entire communities. The vial Malik had spotted wasn't just any toxin. It was a signature of Harrington's own chemical empire, a byproduct of decisions made in boardrooms far removed from the suffering they caused. As security rushed in, Malik's gaze locked with the billionaire's, a silent plea amid the chaos. The truth, when it surfaced, would shatter not just a glass, but the illusions of power and privilege that had built Harrington's fortune on the backs of the unseen. The city held its breath, for this was no mere interruption. It was the beginning of an unraveling, where the poison in the glass mirrored the deeper venom of systemic racism that had left boys like Malik homeless and voiceless. What secrets lay in that spilled wine? And how could one child's cry expose the rot at the core of an empire? Elias Harrington had built his life on the pillars of ambition and innovation, rising from a modest background to helm ChemCorp, a behemoth in the chemical industry. His company produced everything from pharmaceuticals to industrial solvents, fueling economies and lining pockets. At 65, with silver hair and a commanding presence, he was the epitome of success. A philanthropist by day, donating to art museums and universities, yet a ruthless negotiator behind closed doors. His evenings were spent in places like Le Chateau, the exclusive restaurant where only the powerful dined, sealing mergers over vintage Bordeaux. That night he was celebrating a lucrative contract for a new pesticide line, one that promised to revolutionize agriculture but carried whispers of environmental risks he chose to ignore. Across the chasm of privilege, Malik's existence was a stark contrast, forged in the fires of neglect and prejudice. Born in the predominantly black neighborhood of Riverton, on the city's outskirts, he had once known the warmth of a small home, filled with his mother's laughter and his father's quiet wisdom. His father, Jamal, had been a janitor at one of ChemCorp's plants, exposed daily to the fumes and spills that management dismissed as harmless. Riverton was a dumping ground, literally. ChemCorp's waste sites bordered the community, leaching toxins into the soil and water under the guise of regulated disposal. Residents, mostly black and low income, complained of strange illnesses, respiratory issues, skin rashes, unexplained cancers, but their voices were drowned out by lobbyists and officials who labeled them overreacting or uninformed, a subtle veil of racism that prioritized profits over people. Malik's world crumbled. When his father fell ill, his lungs scarred by years of inhalation, medical bills piled up, insurance denied claims citing pre-existing conditions, a code for the systemic barriers that trapped families like his. His mother, Aisha, worked double shifts as a nurse, but it wasn't enough. Eviction followed. Then, homelessness, as Riverton homes were condemned due to contamination levels deemed unsafe, yet no relocation aid came. Malik, at 10, learned to survive on the streets, scavenging and observing. He had a keen mind, devouring discarded books on chemistry from library dumpsters, piecing together how the very substances his father handled were killing his community. He recognized patterns, the acrid smell of benzene derivatives, the way they mimicked everyday odors but betrayed themselves in concentration. That fateful night, as thunder rolled, Malik huddled near Le Chateau's alley, drawn by the shelter of its awning. He spotted a shadowy figure, a disgruntled employee perhaps, tampering with a wine bottle, adding a clear liquid that fizzed subtly. The scent hit him like a memory. The same chemical that had poisoned Riverton's water supply years ago, a byproduct ChemCorp had accidentally released. Curiosity turned to horror as he realized the target was inside. What drove this boy to intervene? A spark of defiance against a system that had taken everything from him, or something deeper, a connection he couldn't yet name. As the restaurant descended into pandemonium, with waitstaff ushering patrons away and security pinning Malik to the floor, Elias Harrington's mind raced. The spilled wine seeped into the carpet, its aroma now mingled with an unnatural bitterness that prickled his nostrils. He demanded answers, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Police arrived swiftly, testing the residue on site, with portable kits. The results were unequivocal. Cyanide, laced in a sophisticated compound derived from industrial solvents, ChemCorp's own patented formula. The billionaire's face paled. This was no accident but an assassination attempt. Who would dare? And how did this street urchin know? Malik was hauled to a holding room, his thin frame trembling not from fear, but from the cold seeping through his wet clothes. Interrogators pressed him, but he remained silent, his eyes darting like trapped animals. Harrington, intrigued and unsettled, insisted on speaking with him privately. As the boy sat across from the tycoon in a lavish office adjacent to the restaurant, the contrast was stark. Power versus poverty, privilege versus peril. Malik's story unraveled slowly, not in words at first, but in the scars on his hands from foraging in contaminated lots, the hollow cheeks from malnutrition. Riverton's history was one of deliberate neglect. In the 1990s, ChemCorp selected the area for its waste facilities because land was cheap and residents lacked political clout, a classic case of environmental racism. Studies buried by corporate influence showed elevated toxin levels correlating with higher rates of birth defects and chronic diseases among Black families. Malik's father had been part of a whistleblower group, documenting spills and lobbying for cleanup. But retaliation came swift. Layoffs disguised as restructuring, harassment from local authorities swayed by donations. Jamal's exposure worsened, leading to a painful death from lung fibrosis, officially ruled occupational hazard, but whispered as corporate murder. Malik's mother, overwhelmed by grief and debt, spiraled into depression, losing her job and their home. The boy wandered the streets, learning survival chemistry the hard way, testing water sources with makeshift indicators, avoiding poisoned food from dumpsters near industrial zones. He had seen friends sicken, families displaced, all while ChemCorp thrived, its CEO oblivious or complicit. Harrington listened, his composure cracking. He recalled board meetings where cost-benefit analyses justified minimal regulations in low-impact areas, code for minority neighborhoods. Guilt gnawed at him. Had his empire's growth come at this cost? Investigations deepened. The poisoner was identified, a former ChemCorp engineer, bitter over a demotion, who had access to restricted chemicals. But the trail led further. Emails, revealed a cover-up of Riverton's contamination, with Harrington's signature on documents approving expedited disposal to cut costs. The billionaire confronted his past, visiting Riverton under the cover of night. The desolate streets, abandoned homes with warning signs, and makeshift memorials to the afflicted painted a damning picture. He met survivors, their stories echoing. Malik's discriminatory zoning laws that funneled pollution to black areas, denied health care, economic redlining that perpetuated cycles of poverty, tension built as media caught wind. Leaks suggested Harrington's involvement in the scandals, threatening his legacy. Protests erupted outside ChemCorp headquarters, chants decrying toxic racism. Malik, now under protective custody, became a symbol. The boy who exposed the poison, both literal and metaphorical. Harrington's internal struggle intensified. He pored over old files, discovering his company's role in suppressing studies on racial disparities in environmental health. The stakes rose. If the full truth emerged unchecked, it could topple his empire. Yet ignoring it meant perpetuating the injustice that had orphaned Malik. As days turned to weeks, Malik's knowledge proved invaluable. He assisted chemists in analyzing the poison, revealing it was laced with a stabilizer unique to ChemCorp's waste, linking the assassination directly to internal sabotage born from the company's toxic culture. Harrington faced board members, some complicit in the cover-ups, forcing resignations amid growing scrutiny. The emotional weight pressed on. Visions of Malik's father, a man whose potential was squandered by bias, mirrored the boy's own brilliance stifled by circumstance. Racial injustice wasn't abstract. It was in the water, the air, the opportunities denied. The rising tide of revelations threatened to drown them both. Harrington grappled with redemption, while Malik wrestled with trust. Could a man from the system that broke him truly change? Protesters demanded accountability. Lawsuits loomed, and the poison's shadow lengthened, exposing layers of corruption tied to broader societal ills like discriminatory policies in housing and employment. The city buzzed with anticipation. The truth was surfacing, but at what cost? The confrontation peaked in ChemCorp's gleaming boardroom, under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights that seemed to expose every flaw. Harrington stood at the head of the table, facing a cadre of executives, lawyers, and investigators. Malik, small but resolute, was there too, invited as a witness. His presence a living indictment. Documents sprawled across the surface. Internal. Memos detailing the Riverton dumps, health reports suppressed, and financial trails showing payoffs to silence complaints. The air thickened with accusation as Harrington revealed the assassination plot's roots. Not just personal grudge, but a symptom of the company's unchecked greed that fostered resentment. A key executive, Harrington's longtime deputy, cracked. Under pressure, admitting to authorizing illegal discharges to boost quarterly profits, knowing the impacts fell disproportionately on black communities. It was business, he muttered, but the room recoiled. Malik's eyes burned with recognition. This was the machinery of racism, oiled by indifference. Harrington, voice steady but laced with fury, fired him on the spot, triggering a cascade. Federal agents tipped off, raided facilities, uncovering stockpiles of mislabeled toxins. The billionaire himself faced questioning. Had he known? His denials rang hollow at first, but evidence showed his signatures were forged in some cases. A betrayal. From within. The intensity crested when Malik spoke up, describing the night his father collapsed, gasping from chemical burns, dismissed by doctors as lifestyle issues, a euphemism for blaming the victim. The room fell silent, the weight of generations of injustice crashing down. Harrington, overcome, admitted his complicity in overlooking warnings, prioritizing expansion. Over ethics. Tears streaked his face as he pledged full transparency. Outside, news helicopters hovered, capturing arrests as the poisoner and accomplices were led away. The climax surged with emotional rawness. Malik's forgiveness withheld, yet a spark of alliance formed. The empire teetered, but in that moment the poison was purged, not just from the glass, but from the soul of the system. In the aftermath, the city transformed under the ripple effects of that shattered glass. Harrington, stripped of illusions, orchestrated a massive overhaul at ChemCorp. He allocated billions to remediate Riverton, transforming toxic sites into community parks and health centers. Lawsuits were settled generously, with funds establishing trusts for affected families. Malik's mother, Aisha, received comprehensive care, recovering to advocate for environmental justice. The boy himself was adopted into a stable home, though Harrington respected boundaries, offering scholarships instead of paternal overreach. Malik enrolled in a prestigious STEM program, his innate chemistry talent blooming into innovations for safe, equitable tech. Broader changes unfolded. ChemCorp adopted strict anti-racism policies, mandating diversity in leadership and community impact assessments for all projects. Harrington testified before Congress, pushing for legislation against environmental racism, citing Riverton as a cautionary tale. Protests evolved into partnerships, with organizations like the NAACP collaborating on awareness campaigns. Malik's story went viral, inspiring youth in marginalized communities to pursue science, proving talent thrives despite barriers. Years later, as Harrington retired, he reflected on the boy's cry, not just a warning, but a call to awaken. ChemCorp, rebranded as EquiChem, led in sustainable practices, reducing disparities in health outcomes. Malik, now a young researcher, developed filters to detect toxins in water, distributing them free to at-risk areas. The impact echoed. Reduced illness rates in Black neighborhoods, increased corporate accountability nationwide. Yet the scars remained, a reminder that racism's poison lingers. Harrington's final act was endowing a foundation in Jamal's name, supporting homeless children of color in STEM. As viewers, we must ask, how many more Maliks are out there, silenced by systems we ignore? True change demands not just revelation, but relentless action. Let this story stir reflection. Share your thoughts below, and together, let's detoxify our world.